Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, Facebook fans, good afternoon, YouTube fans, good afternoon, family and friends. It's your girl, Bela Biz, for those who know me, aka Linda Rigby. I want to first start off by thanking everyone for joining me on this wonderful Motivational Monday. It's your girl, Bela Biz, and we're excited and happy that you're here. We have a treat for you this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to have a little treat that everybody doesn't even know about. I have someone here. He is my Men of Distinction brother. His name is Reginald C. Harris. He's going to take us into a nice little bit of melody, and we are going to have a treat tonight. Let's go, Reginald. message that jazz saxophonist Reginald Harris conveys every single time he performs. He captivates his listeners with his smooth tones and styles. Reginald is a member of the civic group Men of Distinction, MOD, of Atlanta, which is affiliated with the sister group Women of Distinction that I'm formerly co-founder and executive board member. Thank you so very much, Reginald, for that opening. Now, for those of you who know me, Bella's always about her business. Oh, I have a treat for you tonight. I'm going to go right into the bio and let him speak for himself. We have none other than tonight the legendary council member Michael Julian Bond. Councilman Bond has served Atlanta citywide, representing more than 450,000 local residents since his election to the Atlanta City Council post at large one seat in November of 2009. He's a member of the Committee on Council and the Community Development, Human Resource, and Public Safety Committees. From 1994 to 2001, Michael served on the council as the District 3 representative for portions of the city's South and Northwest quadrants. During that time, he served as the City Council's President pro tempore and as the chair of both the Public Safety and Community Development Committees. Outside of his council duties, Michael serves as the Deputy Director and Chief Program Officer for the Atlanta branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, as we formerly know, the NAACP. He has volunteered with the American Diabetes Association for more than 20 years, serving on its national board from 2011 and 2013. And I'm proud to say I have supported him with the Women of Distinction for those years. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Michael is the son of the late civil rights icon leader Julian Bond and his wife Alice. He attended Frederick Douglass High School, Morehouse College, and Georgia State University. In 2011, Michael received his certification for the Senior Executive in State and Local Government from Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. He's an active member of the Antioch Baptist Church in North Atlanta. And trust me, Michael is no stranger to us. He has the shortest bio I have yet to read, but he has so many accolades. I can go on and on. Without further ado, Facebook family, YouTube family, and family and friends, I'd like to introduce you tonight to none other than the electress Michael Julian Bond. Hey, Michael.
It's good to see you, and thank you for having me. And I need to take you with me everywhere for that great. Thank you for that great introduction.
Oh, I'm ready.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir. Now, as the audience knows, Michael, I'm going to go right into the topic and get out the way. We are discussing tonight just general conversation about getting out the vote. As I like to say from the League of Women Voters, we're going to power the vote. And so tonight, we want to let everyone know a disclaimer. We are not endorsing any candidates, but we are strictly having a conversation this evening about powering the vote, the importance of voting, and why we should vote. So without further ado, I'm going to let Michael take the floor, and I'm going to move out the way. Go ahead, Michael. You have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to your audience for participating and watching us via Facebook. It's good that they have expressed that interest. Voting, as I see it, is the one power that is guaranteed to every citizen in America by the Constitution. What do I mean by that? You know, the Constitution is obviously our bedrock legal document that defines our laws. Our systems of laws are based on the Constitution. As we are defined as individuals in America, we have that one power, and that's to cast a ballot. We have freedom to do many things, but we have one power, and that is to cast a ballot, a vote for an issue or an individual or a principle. And so what I'm going to be doing tonight is appealing to the audience that they use that power. As you stated correctly, we're going to be nonpartisan on this program, but that doesn't, being nonpartisan means that we can't endorse, a candidate or a party. but we can talk about the fundamental powers of what your vote means, not only as a collective, as a collected vote during an election, but to you as an individual. And so, one of the things I want to lead off with is that voting is your power. Voting is your key to participating in the democratic process that's set up in our country. And so, I'm going to kind of turn the expectation of voting on its head and say that, you know, we all have just voted, hopefully, for or in the presidential election. And regardless of who your candidate was, a lot of people have the belief that that's probably one of the most important votes that they will cast, you know, in recent times, you know, or in the future. But I'm going to argue tonight that the lower you go down to the local level, your vote becomes all that more powerful and all that more important. Every vote matters, but what matters in particular is that you use that vote in every election, not just the presidential election, not just in the elections for higher office, but in your local elections, because it is in your local elections that the vote, the implementation of your vote or the lack thereof affects you the most. Now, we have a special election coming up on January the 5th, but you are eligible to vote now, right now, in that special election, regardless of which candidate you choose. You have the ability and power to do that now, and you should. Why do you ask? Well, the reason to cast a ballot is not just to vote for candidate A or candidate B, or for a person that you like, or to use your vote to vote against a person that you don't like. Yes, it's true that when you cast a ballot, that's technically what happens. But what also happens is that you as an individual in your individual precinct, in your individual city council district, or Fulton County or county commission district, or state representative or state senate district, or region or state, you are registering your participation in that community, so that when people want to invest in your community and they pull the voting rolls out and they look at the rolls, they say, well, which areas have people that participate the most, that i.e. care the most for their community? And that's where you're going to see people put those resources. That's where you're going to see your local government, your city, county, state government put your tax dollars back into those communities where people vote the most. And most people don't think that far ahead, or extend their logic when they consider voting that far. And I'll give you an example. Most people don't know. I represent the city of Atlanta, the entire city, and it's broken up into 12 council districts. And so most people assume, because Buckhead is in the northern most council districts, largely split between districts 7 and 8, that people probably figure because there's a lot of private money that's spent in Buckhead on development and real estate and, developing businesses, but that's probably where the city spends most of its money per capita. But you would be wrong. The city of Atlanta spends most of its per capita income in the districts that vote most often. That capital improvements on streets, capital improvements, sidewalks, lighting, infrastructure, all the things that the city proper is responsible for. And those, and the two highest precincts, not only in Atlanta, but in the state of Georgia, are located in Southwest Atlanta.
Wow.
There in Council District 10, that's now represented by my good friend and colleague, Councilwoman Andrea Boone. That would be, I believe, 10C and 10A. They're the highest voting precincts in all of the state of Georgia. And so if you wonder why presidential candidates, gubernatorial candidates, Senate candidates, candidates all the way down the line that overlap that district go there to campaign is because that's where people go who vote the most. And so it's not only just in Atlanta. I would challenge our viewers to take any political jurisdiction, any city, anywhere in America, and overlay the voter registration and voter participation map, and you will find that any jurisdiction in every jurisdiction in America where the voter percentage is highest, that's where they spend most or a larger portion of their tax dollars.
Michael, can I interject you for 1 second? I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir, but something just came in my spirit. I'm going to take the liberty, because as you well know, Michael, I know a lot about city government and city council and us working together. I'm going to take the time right now to ask you a direct question. A lot of people tell me, and I'm not going to put anyone on blast, I don't know who my council person is. I don't know who and within my jurisdiction, right? It doesn't matter what county I live in. We're going to talk about Georgia, right? We're going to talk about the 159 counties that's in Georgia. There's a lot of people in different counties. I'll take my county. I live in Fulton County. A lot of people don't even know, Michael, and there's no shame. We want about transparency tonight. Who is my council member? Who is my commissioner? Who are the people that from the local aspect that represent me? Can you help us, just real simple, how can we help identify that and help people out tonight?
Well, one of the things you can do, regardless of where you live, is chances are your local government has a web page. And so if you go to that local web page, you should see a listing of your local elected official on that page. In the city of Atlanta, it's atlantaga.gov. And I believe, I don't want to misquote, the Fulton County webpage, but I believe that it is fultonga.gov as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you can Google it on your phone. So any county or city or municipality that you live in, you can go to their local webpage. You can find out that information. And at least their email and office phone number will be listed.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I just wanted to put that in. I also wanted to add to a listening audience that the League of Women Voters has something called an app, and it's called Vote, VOTE 411.org. But I want to specify, you can also use that app, but it's only as much information as possibly can be in there. Some people are not in there. Why? Because they haven't voted, right, Michael? They haven't registered. It's only as good as the information is given in there. So I wanted to put that in. But Michael, continue, because we're gonna break some chains tonight.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I want people to understand is that, there's an old adage, an old joke that says, well, I don't want to register to vote because I don't want to get jury duty, right? I'm called up for jury duty or some such thing like that. But you're hurting the community. I think the people who are most dangerous in our society are not necessarily those who commit crimes, but those who are educated and know better but won't do better. Those who have the knowledge, have the awareness, but don't vote. Because when you don't vote, you're an automatic no, regardless of what the issue is. You're an automatic no, regardless of who the candidates are. And you're pulling down the average of the voting amounts in your particular area. That leads to the scenario that I was talking about just a few moments ago, that these communities that have lower voting percentages often get less resources from their local, county, and state governments. Because there's another old adage in politics that says the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the grease. The person that makes the noise, that makes the demand of those who are in power is the one who gets responded to. So as you, as an individual, are not voting in your community, you are helping to quell the voice of your community. You are stamping down your community's voice by your individual lack of participation. And so that's why it is extremely important that at every opportunity, you use your power, cast a ballot and vote, because we are individuals, and of course I mentioned the Constitution. It talks a lot about individual rights, but we're still a community, we're still a city, we're still a county, we're still linked by proximity and by hopefully a sense of community, that we can't change problems of our society on our own. We need to be linked to other people to do that. And so when you vote in an election, that's how change is wrought, is that those collective acts of voting are put together with hundreds, sometimes thousands, sometimes millions of other actions to change, to make a decision that will change policy, that might change perspective, or might maintain the majority will on the progress that the people perceive that the community is making. But it's only done together. And so if you want to see change, if you want to see your community improve, it's not enough to wind your elected officials up and let them go and don't look for them again until it's time for them to run again.
Yeah.
You need to be actively involved this much to cast a vote, to, at least this much in casting your vote and using your power in the community. And that's what's at stake in this election. And the next point of that I would make is that, we've got to change the way that we look at elections. We kind of look at elections like it's either Christmas or maybe your birthday, that it's kind of a one-time big deal that we've got to build up to. And, we don't want to miss it if it happens. But elections are actually like innings in baseball. So they're kind of routine. They're expected. There's always going to be another one, yet another one to be played, another one to be participated in. And so we've got to develop a habit about voting. Every election is special. Every election is unique because every election affects the future of where you stand or where you exist. But it's not so special an occasion that you've got to ramp up and it's a one-time deal. You're going to have to do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just like you get an at bat in baseball, you're going to have to take the field and defend the field. You're going to have to come back again and then take another at bat, then go to the field and take another at bat. Voting is routine, like the sun rising and setting, like the moon rising and setting. It's something that we have to become accustomed to so that we can exercise our power faithfully, so that we can have the change we made. Now, there's been a lot made of Georgia in this last presidential election, going from typically electing a Republican to electing a Democrat. And what I'd like to say on that, and people act like that has been some type of miracle, but it really isn't a miracle. It's the result of those on the Democratic side working hard to get out their base. And I'll put this point out there for folks, those who are likely to vote Democrat, let's say, for example, are African Americans. And there are over 300,000 eligible African Americans that typically would vote Democrat that do not vote on a regular basis. And so, George, it's been a great amount of conversation and amazement because in November the 3rd, Georgia went Democratic, but Georgia could have gone Democratic a decade ago. Georgia could have gone Democratic 15 years ago if those same African Americans who typically lean Democratic had only exercised their power and voted. And so, and what you see on the flip side of that is that there were a few 100,000 white Georgians who typically would lean Republican that were not voting also. But in 2016, the Republican Party, the Trump campaign, was able to get them out and further cement his victory in Georgia. And so it's not just a case of, well, I didn't like Hillary Clinton, or I don't like Donald Trump, or who the candidates are. If you want to see your community change, and whether you lean red or whether you lean blue, if you're not an active participant, then you're not doing anything to solve the problem.
That's good, Michael. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I want to ask you a question regarding Democrat, Republican. I'm talking about candidates in general. In my personal opinion, again, these are disclaimers of my own personal opinion. We've gotten to me far away from what the candidates are offering, and would lean more toward Democrat, Republican, and Libertarian in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. So from your perspective and your long history of years, absolutely within your family, I'm not from Georgia. For those who know me, I'm from North. I'm from Maryland. But I do understand and recognize I've been here for 20 years. And there are 159 counties, Michael. And what I have noticed over the 20 years I've been here, the change, the dip, the curves. And we're getting away from exactly what are the people who are in the election, what are they talking about? What are the facts? What do they represent? Can you help us a little bit? Because sometimes we can get immersed in the campaign of the commercials, right? Mm-hmm. I know I can just be transparent. I've gotten about 17 different slicks, mailing information, understanding that this election is very important. But can you just unpack a little bit to help the listener audience understand, as to if they haven't made up their mind who they want to vote for, how will they determine that as far as the issues are concerned?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon every voter, every person to do their own research because, it is illegal to lie in court, but it's not illegal to lie on television in these political, commercials. So whether you lean red or blue, it is incumbent upon you to do more research. And that's one of the things that the League of Women Voters is actually very good at, is fielding and screening candidates who are running for various offices. When I first ran for Atlanta City Council back in 1993, I had developed all of these great plans and brochures, and I was running in the district that I had grown up in. I knew the people. But I had all these great ideas. And as I walked door to door, and, I went to every single door in the district at least 3 times and talked about my ideas, what got reflected back to me was, people would say, Mr. Bond, that sounds great, but I've got a dead dog in the street right out here that I need somebody to come and get. Or this house across the street from me needs to be boarded up, needs to be repaired, or there's this problem over here or this problem over there. And so what I found that in my experience running for office is that it is best to try to reflect the will and opinions of those whom you're seeking to represent, because it is a communal process. You're dependent upon them for votes. They're dependent upon you for results. And so when you're looking at any candidate, you want to do your own research on the person, because it is to the advantage of their opponent that they want to send you, whether it's mail or emails or television commercial, radio ads, what have you, to disparage the other guy. So you'll vote for them to make them look bad. But we've got to be more aware citizens. And it's in today's technology, it's more easier than ever to research people, because we've all got Google, on our cell phones. We all have access to instant information, and you can go to the candidates' own web pages and see what they're talking about, and to help to discern the sound from the noise. But a lot of times it is hard, because negative campaigning, whether it's by the Republicans, the Democrats, or whomever, seems to be effective, because in society, sometimes people are more willing to believe something negative than something positive. But we've got to try to educate ourselves, because, it does matter who gets in the office, because you want to have the right person in whatever the seat it is that's going to reflect your interests and make the best decisions on behalf of your individual community. And so you've got to do the research. And there's nothing wrong with putting questions to those candidates, regardless of the level of office that they're running for, whether it's local or whether it's national. You want to send questions to them. If you go to a forum, or if you're if you have access to their email and can send them a message, send them a question. Now ask them, prod them, poke at them, find out what they're standing for, and see if it aligns with your own beliefs.
That's good, Michael. I'm going to read a couple of facts from being, and I will take the liberty of being a part of the state league. This is just hot off the press from today, the League of Women Voters. It says Georgia is the only state in the country that has a runoff election from the 2020 general. And they were the only state, well, we are the only state for the cycle, right? That we have both the Senate seats up for the election. With these historical runoffs set for January 5th, Georgia voters have the opportunity, as you spoke to decide who will be in control of the Senate for the next 2 years. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I know we've had a runoff, an election, and we know our very own Kwanzaa Hall is filling in that seat as we speak right now for District 5 for the late, great Congressman John Lewis. Speak a little bit, if you don't mind, Michael, to your experience to help people understand that, because I think there's still some misconceptions out there.
Yeah, this runoff law was created here in Georgia to help incumbents. And at the time, all of the incumbents were white individuals. And so Georgia, unlike a lot of southern states, in certain municipalities, in certain areas, African Americans could vote at least on the local level. And so just like now, it's hard to get people out to vote if you don't have the right motivating message. And so there were many African Americans who put themselves out for office and ran for seats. The old Georgia Voters League that was established by John Wesley Dobbs, the grandfather of our first African American mayor, Maynard Jackson. He and his colleague, I believe John Calhoun, who was a staunch Republican, but he was what was called a Lincoln Republican at the time. They vied for office and backed candidates. And typically what would happen is because minorities were always the minority in the same minority status in an election, but they were growing in urban areas around the state. And so elections from the 30s and the 40s going into the 50s became increasingly close. And so the chances were, because then, just like now, there were more people registered than actually voted. The potential was there for one of these old Dixiecrats, that's what they used to call the white Democrats, who were the majority in the South and in Georgia, for them to lose to an African American, probably Republican candidate. So they created this runoff law to have another election for those who are the top two vote getters. And so typically it would be harder to get the minorities back for the second election.
Mm-hmm.
And majority candidate, white candidate, would usually win. But that law has come back to haunt the Democratic Party in Georgia on a couple of occasions. One most principally was the re-election attempt of White Fowler, the former U.S. Senator and former Atlanta City Council president, who lost in a runoff in the early 90s. There have been other occasions of statewide races where this has happened. It happened to my father between a race between he and my godfather, John Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
My father was the majority candidate when they ran for Congress. He got 49% of the vote, but they had to have a runoff. And then in the runoff, 80% of the African Americans voted for my dad.
Wow.
Then voted for John, but 80% of the white vote went to John, and they turned out in a higher percentage, and that's how John got to Congress. And so it's been a controversial law since its beginning. And even I ran for city council president once. I was the majority candidate going in, didn't get 51%. Again, we had a runoff 3 weeks later. I got a larger percentage of African American votes in this big African American city, but there were more white people that turned out, and Kathy Woolard, the commentator on the Georgia game, was able to win the election. So some argue around that it's not fair, and that's something that we have to wrestle with here in Georgia, because the flip side has been true too, that the person with the lowest percentage of the vote can overtake the person who got the majority.
Mm-hmm.
And with Kwanzaa, though, it was a little different because John had passed away, so
Right.
they would have to have an election to replace him. But he did get the larger percentage of the vote over Dr. Franklin, but neither one of them were close to 50% at all. So some might argue to say, well, you didn't even have 50% of the people who normally vote in the district, U.S. District 5 seat participating. But, that's kind of a false argument, because everybody has the opportunity to vote. So whether or not people show up or not in the numbers that you think they might, that doesn't matter. I mean, we all have the opportunity to vote. That should just underscore to people why it's so important to vote, because you want to make sure that you do have a candidate who's been endorsed by the district that they're running in a healthy way. We had the death of my good friend and colleague, Council Member Ivy Lee Young.
Yes.
Just a couple of years ago.
Yes.
I mean, less than 11% of the eligible voters participated in the general and the runoff election to replace him. Barely 600 votes were cast in a district that has 35,000 registered voters.
That's disheartening, Michael. And as we're talking and other people are coming on, thank everyone for coming on. I want to talk a little bit about your father's legacy. I got to go there, Michael, because well-respected man, the women of distinction, we were proud to come there and serve him in his funeral. As you all know, you being our MOD brother, we really hats off, but I have to go there. And by that, that's the history, right? And I know that you come from a rich history. I sometimes try to ascertain in my own small mind the difference of the times and generations, how the strive was there, the motivation was there. Can you speak a little bit about the legacy of your father, how I know it certainly trickled into your family, as opposed to people, us African-American people of color, getting out and voting? I mean, sometimes it boggles my mind. People died, fought, bled, and it just seems to be a different twist, if you will, than today.
Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you all for serving at his funeral at Morehouse. That meant a lot to me. One of the things, though, I want to point out, and this is why this is so poignant, because 60 years ago this year was the start of the Atlanta student movement. This was a movement that my father, Lonnie King, and a man named by the name of Joseph, what is Joseph's last name? I believe it's Joseph Freed. There were 3 students at Morehouse who met at the corner of what was then Chestnut and Fair Street, which is now Atlanta Student Movement Boulevard and James P. Brawley Drive, the CAU.
Yes, CAU. Mm-hmm.
But it was a Black-owned business, Yates and Milton, started by a pharmacist and an executive from the Atlanta Life Insurance Company. They had it was a pharmacy, kind of a drugstore that had a restaurant in it, and they met, and they were the nucleus that triggered the Atlanta student movement to desegregate the city of Atlanta. And Atlanta, unlike some, northern cities, or probably most cities around the country where there was segregation, Atlanta's Black population could vote, but they were still, even though they were growing minority, but they were still in the minority. They began when they decided to sit in downtown Atlanta. They gathered students from all around the Atlanta University Center, Morehouse College, Spelman College, Clark College, then Atlanta University proper, and the Interdenominational Theological Center, and of course Morehouse. They got students from all 6 institutions and decided that they were going to begin a sit-in movement there to desegregate Atlanta. You know, at the time, Rich's Department Store, which was the major store in the, not just in Atlanta, but the southeastern United States, was a major shopping center. For those around the north, the northern equivalent could only be Macy's.
Macy's, right.
Could only be Macy's. You know, Rich's was so rich that during the Great Depression, the city of Atlanta was broke. And so Rich's Department Store paid the salaries of the teachers.
Wow.
That's how much money Rich's had. And so that particular April, during Easter, they were protesting Easter. They said, wear old clothes. Don't shop here. Don't get, you know, of course, you know, African Americans got to have something new for Easter.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We got to be sharp on Easter.
Oh, yeah.
They boycotted Rich's. And they cost Rich's almost $10 million in 1960 money during that Easter weekend. They lost, you know, the equivalent of $10 million in 1960s money. But along with their protests and engaging the business community and the city government directly to desegregate, they registered people to vote. Some of these students during that same year, after the boycott in Greensville, they were called up to North Carolina, and they were all co-founders of SNCC. I mean, that's actually where my father and John Lewis met, you know, and they became participants in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was supposed to be a kind of a subset or subgroup of SCLC, but they quickly, rebelled, against that kind of control and supervision. Mm-hmm. And so, my father, along with students like Carolyn Long Banks, who was Charles Persons, who was a freedom rider, mm-hmm. And just hundreds of others began to organize here in Atlanta, and they organized people around the vote. The first was the election of Ivan Allen, who became mayor, but they had another candidate. They had another candidate at first, but it was only until Ivan Allen agreed to go along with desegregating Atlanta mm-hmm. did the students shift and change and follow the example of the other Black leadership, people like Williams Holmes Borders and Daddy King and Leroy Johnson, who was an assistant district attorney. He was first Black state senator since Reconstruction, but at that time was in the district attorney's office. He was first Black lawyer hired in the district attorney's office, and many other stalwart leaders like Herman Russell and my man from I can see his face from at the Atlanta Life Insurance company, and it's going to come back to me. But all of these individuals were helping to guide the students because even though Atlanta had been on the forefront of a lot of civil rights cases mm-hmm. That got litigated and were supported by the NAACP, one famous case, or not so forgotten case, prior to Brown versus the Board of Education, who my grandfather did the research for, because he and Thurgood Marshall were good friends from their Lincoln University days. Dr. Benjamin Mays, who was president of Morehouse, had the same kind of public accommodations lawsuit mm-hmm. in the 40s.
Wow.
And they were litigating a lot, but there wasn't a lot of direct action or demonstration. There was hardly any of that until the student movement came along. And so the student movement was successful in Atlanta and became an example to the movements in Memphis, in Nashville, all around the South. And so they used it as a blueprint to go around to desegregate these southern cities. I mean,
right.
Even the freedom rides that John and Miss Nash out of Memphis and others began to participate in, and of course Hank Thomas, who was here, who was a great restaurateur. Good, and he and my dad had a partnership in the old Dairy Queen on Ashford Street. The local Atlanta people will remember that. But he was a freedom rider on the freedom rides. They were all students then and young, and they took this template and went around the South, registering people to vote, and educating people about the power that they actually had. The African American populace in this, particularly in the South, felt completely powerless because you could lose your life.
Sure.
It wasn't a joke. It's not a euphemism. It's not just something people said. You could be killed for exercising rights that were guaranteed to you by the Constitution.
Right.
In fact, the march upon across the Edmund Pettus Bridge that John gets credit for, but was actually led by Hosea Williams.
That's right.
Because it was an SCLC march, and SNCC didn't want to participate. This was one of the times SNCC was trying to break away from SCLC. They didn't endorse the march, and so John just went along with him, by happenstance. But they were marching because Jimmy Lee Jackson, who was protecting his mother a week earlier in a restaurant from the State Patrol, was shot, protecting his mother when they were being harassed in a restaurant down there. And so he died a few days later in the hospital of his wounds. But that's how that was triggered. And so my father felt, and, John, he was my godfather because he and my dad were best friends. They believed in what they were doing. They believed in empowering communities. And, that's why I'm doing what I do today, because I watched him. I watched my dad. I went with him.
Right.
To see him register people to vote. I went with him to community meetings. We traveled throughout the South when he would go and speak to these communities to try to encourage them to do what we're doing tonight, to use your power. It's your power. It's your vote. It's yours. You can use it, to become a participant in helping to shape what tomorrow is going to be, what America's going to be, what your community is going to be.
Right.
It was very inspirational, obviously to me on it and on this subject. And, it's just never lost on me. I remember the first time that I did vote. I was 18 years old. It was the re-election of Ronald Reagan. And I was going to vote for Mondale and Gerald.
Walter Mondale, yes.
Walter Mondale. I mean, I hated that the first time I got to vote for a woman for vice president that she lost. The time I did it, she won. Good friend Kamala Harris, she won. So
yeah. So Michael, I want you to take a breather, maybe take a sip of your Coke. I'm going to, at this point, kind of invite some of the audiences. I do see someone out there. Her name is Shanta Moore. Shanta, shout out, speedy recovery, Godspeed. Shanta has a question. She says, Michael, how do we get the mindset of the African-American people back, unified the way it was as we talk about back in the day? How do we get there, Michael? How can we get there?
Well, it is the doom of men that they forget. People often, and I grew up with in and around the Jewish community, had some friends of mine as teenagers who were, the Jewish faith. And, their parents, their grandparents never let them forget about the Holocaust. And they would complain that they were getting ragged on about the Holocaust. But guess what? They never forget the trials that they experienced. They never forget the struggle that they've endured. And they educate their young, they educate the children, they educate all throughout the lives of their children growing up about what it means to be Jewish, what it means to what their experiences have been. When I was growing up in the 70s, it's almost as if Black people were engaged in a sigh of relief. They didn't want to talk about the struggles anymore because they felt free. They didn't want to talk about the burdens they had carried because they were making gains. And they say, hey, finally, we can put this burden down. But guess what? We can never put it down We have got to become educators of our families, educators of our children, and then by extension, educators of our community about what our struggle means. Because voting means less today because people are educated less about what voting means, what the African American experience means. If, I don't want to step on a live wire, but I'm going to say it. If African American males knew what sagging jeans really meant, nobody would walk around with sagging jeans or where it came from. If you really knew what African American men had to endure coming out of slavery, you would never wear your clothes that way. You would never do it. You would never carry yourself less than impeccable if you understood the grandeur of where African Americans hail from across the sea, not just slavery, because our history didn't begin with slavery.
That's right.
It began in Africa.
That's right.
You really knew where you come from, if you really knew where the seeds of who you are began and germinated from, you wouldn't carry yourself in this way. You wouldn't harm your women. You wouldn't ignore your children and let them grow up like weeds out in the community. We wouldn't do the things we do as a people that are negative if we knew from whence we came. And so for those of us who do know better, we got to do better. We have to educate, starting in the home. Of course, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. We have to start with the mothers in our community and bring, educating their children for where they're coming from, or where they come from, where their history is. I learned on Ancestry.com, and this is just isn't pertinent to African Americans, but most people can't trace their personal history back past their great grandparent.
Mm-hmm.
Have no idea where they come from. So it's not just African Americans, but that's just amazing. And of course, we all know about royalty that's got these, they can trace their history back generations, and they got portraits all over their house of all these people that lived 100, 200, 300 years ago. And that embarks for a sound identity. But we need to maintain that same thing. We open our Bibles up, get one of those big Bibles where you can write the notes and keep records of the births and keep records of who the people that came before us were. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, then that makes us who we are. And so we've got to continue to embark on educating our community, our children in particular, about who they are and what they should be about, or what their culture is and what their culture means and why it's worthy of preservation and edification.
Michael, I appreciate that. I'm going to put myself on a live wire just like you. And I'm going to make a comment and a statement. I'd like for you to follow up with your comments, and maybe we'll take a couple more people's questions. I'm a part of the League of Women Voters. As you all know, I'm proud to be a part on the state board, and there's only 3 of us on the state board. I'll be totally transparent. And when we just celebrated, as you well know, our 100th anniversary over the summer months between June and August, and we had a whole barrage of events. And long story short, I'm always mindful of where I am and where I'm at. And we always say that, Michael, don't we? You got to know where you came from so you know where you're going. But I'm going to the situation now where a lot of our ancestors, right, who went before us, fought, died, bled. They were abolitionists. They were activists. There were many Martin Luther Kings. There were many Julian Bonds, so on and so forth. Names that we can't even imagine. I'm always reminded in the organization I'm in, I'm very proud to be a part of that there's always separation. But I'm always reminded more so, Michael, that we are always there. People of color, we are always, whether we're in the trenches or in the back, we are always there. It's a tenacity that we have no matter what. Knocked down, but not defeated. Dragged down, but get back up, right? I'm always mindful. That's something that I carry personally, that I sometimes, I think, set the expectation with other people, and I'll be transparent with that. That's my expectation of people, although they don't meet them. So I say that to ask you this. People always say, oh, we're at the seat at the table. We got to sit at the table, right? So when you're at the table, you should speak. I want you to speak to the fact that we're always seem to be in the forefront, in the background. All odds always against us, but we keep on ticking like that good energy bunny, right, Michael?
Yeah.
What can we do today based on what we say? We know we cannot solve it tonight. We know the cliche Rome was not built in a day. What can we do with the entire world? All eyes are on Georgia with this runoff election. And just in general, we know that we missed a step, right, Michael? We know that we are not getting out voting. We know that some people don't even do the census, for God's sake, because they don't want to be attached. All these things are tied to. And people say, oh, I don't want to vote. It doesn't matter. It does matter because we know, Michael, a no vote is a vote to the other party. And more importantly, Michael, the voices of the young and all the different genres. What can we do starting tonight, Michael? What can we do starting tonight to galvanize, to organize, to strategize, to come together, stripping down our titles and whatever we're doing, just come together as a people that we can maybe move that needle a little bit?
Well, first, we need to take the personal responsibility of making sure that we're using our power, that we actually vote ourselves. I voted yesterday at the Metropolitan Library on Metropolitan Parkway for the Sunday voting. And I can now say, I've done it. How about you?
I did it last Monday on the 14th, Michael, first day.
That's right. That's my son's birthday. Baby boy at 31. So anyway, we need to make sure that we're reaching out to all of our networks because we're all connected to people, not just our family, but to friends, associates, work, people that we work with, people that we know with the elementary school, with high school, with fraternity, sorority, etc. Church, to reach out to those individuals, send a text message, send an email blast, or do better, call them and say, hey, I voted. Have you voted? You need to go and vote. Will you please go and vote? I'll help you find a ride to the polls. I'll help you, find out where people can go and cast their ballots, for early voting. It's too late for probably, unless you already have it, a mail-in ballot.
Right.
If you mail-in ballot, I'll tell you where you can go drop it off. I'll tell you where you can go put it in a drop box. And we have to be agitators for our own deliverance. We have to be agitators for our own freedoms. And so the only way that, Maynard Jackson once said, it's one thing to be free, but it's something else to stay free. Be in the mode of staying free. And in the mode of staying free, we have to be exercising and using all of the tools that we have at our disposal. And so, I got an iPhone here. I've got at least 5,000 numbers in here. I can send an email or I can send a text to hundreds, thousands of people. And I'm sure, other than probably the amount of people that's in the phone, that same practice can be used and duplicated over and over again. That's in the short term for the January 5th election. We have to remember and remind people to use their power, because is when we as individuals use our power collectively, we extend that reach, we all become empowerful. Our community becomes empowered. Our community becomes better because we've demonstrated, not only have we put candidate A or candidate B into office, we've demonstrated that we are people in this community that care enough, one, to show up and to cast a ballot to cause something to happen, to cause a result. And so we'll have that result. We'll have the demonstration of that result far after the election is over, because people will say, hey, these people in 10C or 3T or whatever the precinct is, they show up, they vote. So people who run for office in the future will say, I got to go by that community. I've got to go by that neighborhood. I've got to go by that church. I've got to go by that park or recreation center, because the people there care, they vote. So it triggers a reaction in the actions of future actors who want to be empowered to represent people. And so it's a collective type of action. And then two, we also need to reach out to people, because you're right, there are people who have sweated They bled, they died, they're buried for us to have our what should have been due to us at the beginning of this country, our right to vote. You know, it's not an accident. It's not a cliche. You have to go out and use your power. You know, we all are all connected. You know, if we're not only if it's to our parents. Our parents had to struggle. Our parents had to face
That's
racism.
right.
They had to face discrimination so that we didn't have to. If you don't owe Frederick Douglass, or if you don't owe Martin Luther King, or if you don't owe Fannie Lou Hamer anything, fine. But you owe your parents.
Come on, Michael.
You owe your grandparents. You know, they had to stand in lines. They had to go through colored only exits. You know, or not even be able to allow to shop in stores or to vote for a candidate of their choice. You owe them. So if not for somebody famous or someone well known, you know people in your own family, people who've had their own struggles in the military or in the civil service that had to endure this type of discrimination so that you can be thusly empowered. It's time for you to have that kind of return. And then thirdly, it's just the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do as a citizen, to go and use your power and to vote. If you don't vote, you lose your right to complain. Period. You don't vote, you're saying you don't want to participate. You don't want to play and engage, then you lose the right to comment on what's going on in society. And so why would you do that? You know, I guess we're about to close, but I want to leave people with one point. Everybody likes cartoons. Everybody grew up watching cartoons or reading comic books, or, you know, the Wonder Woman movie just came out, you know,
Yeah.
this past weekend. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was great. But, you know, not once in that movie did Wonder Woman say, you know what? I'm not going to use my magic lasso anymore. I'm not going to use my super strength no more. You know, you never hear Superman say, you know what? I'm just not going to be invulnerable today. You know, I'm not going to fly anymore. You know, superheroes don't give up their power. But you give up yours. Don't give up your power. Use your power. Vote.
Michael, I'm going to ask you, we have a few more minutes. In the spirit of your father, he was a great man. I'm not just saying that. I mean, he came to Baltimore a lot.
Yeah.
I saw Julian Bond. I grew up under the Parent J. Mitchell, who you know, auspices, and Kwasim Fume. I mean, they were like door to door, right? And they were in our community. So I grew up an activist watching my mother and my family be involved. And in the spirit of your father, because the legacy lives on through you, Michael, and the rest of your siblings, your entire family. What do you know? What do you know your father would say for such a time as this? Because you have the same spirit, Michael, to galvanize and get this audience tonight. And as we replay this again and again until January 5th, to change the needle, to change the mindset for those who don't vote, who won't vote, who just don't think it's darn ain't necessary. I want you to leave the last words with a call of action to these people, Michael.
Well, thank you for that. I'll tell you a story that my father used to like to tell. He said that there were two men standing on a riverbank, and you know they were by some rapids, and then all of a sudden there was a baby floating around in the river. One jumped in and pulled the baby out. Said, how in the world did this baby get into the water? And they debated it. They talked about it. But while they were having that debate, another baby was in the water. And so the first guy jumped back into the water to pull the baby out of the water. So, man, it's great that I was standing here to pull this baby out of the water. And so there's like, how did these two kids get into the water? While they're debating it, guess what? Another baby comes. And then there's another baby comes. So the guy jumps in and pulls them both out of the water. And while he's trying to get out of the water, the second man begins to run away. And he says, hey, wait, where are you going? I need help. I need help with these kids. We need help to save these kids. And the second guy says, I'm going to go find out who's throwing babies in the water upriver. I said that to say that we can respond to what's in front of us, you know, in a knee-jerk reaction to try to make a difference, or we can act to prevent the problem in the first place. When you go and vote, you are acting to change and to resolve the problems that might face your community, not only today, but tomorrow as well. because you're saying to the powers that be, not just the candidates who might be on the ballot, but anyone who's interested in your community for whatever reason, whether it's an economic reason, whether it's a societal reason, whether it's for a developmental purpose, that this is a community that uses its power and it votes. And so there's a certain amount of respect. There's a certain amount of deference that is given to a group or individual or an area or a town or a county, a state or a neighborhood that exercises its right to vote. You know, there's a reason why politicians come to your community. There's a reason why Joe Biden came to Georgia last week, and the person who's sitting in the White House came the few days before. It's not just to stand next to have a photo op with the people who are running for office. It's because people have power and they want people to use and implement that power in their direction. And you have the power as an individual to affect the outcome of this election. You have a duty to those who came before you, those in your direct family, those in your household, those who you may have nurtured, those who you may have buried, that have suffered the injustices of the past, for you not to let their effort or their suffering go to waste. It is you who have the obligation to now use your power to make change so that no one in your family, none of your descendants, generations into the future, have to suffer the indignities, the issues, the problems, or deal with the inequities that you face today by not going to the polls and standing on the sideline. God didn't make you to stand on the sideline. God didn't put you in America and have you grow up and be able to register to vote for you to then turn around and not use your power. You know, imagine if David were standing before the lion or standing before Goliath, and he decided not to use those smooth stones in his. Imagine that. You can't imagine that, right? Because why won't you go and vote? Why won't you go and use your power and help to change and build a better tomorrow? You know, mouths are great inventions. They can say anything, but guess what? Mouths can't do everything. It takes you. Everybody can say and talk about voting, but it takes you, your body, your actions, your intentions to go and do it. We need you to go and do it. We need you to be engaged. We all say we want a better America. That's easy to say, but how do you do it? You do it by voting. Go to the polls and vote now. Early voting is going on until Thursday at 7 p.m. That's December the 31st at 7 p.m. Make a plan. Go vote now. Now. Go vote on January 5th. Now. Go to the polls now. Now. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, guess what? If you're going to work, you have to go into the office. Every employee in Georgia has to allow time.
That's right. 2 hours.
2 hours to go and vote. There's no excuses anymore other than you need to get up off your can and go to the polls and vote. Use your power. The society needs you. You're a superhero. We need you to come to our rescue. You do that by using your power and voting.
Michael, I'm not even going to try to top that. All I got to say is thank you, thank you, thank you. And I am going to be transparent and put you in front of these people and say, I'm going to have you back. Because whatever the scenario is after January 5th, I'm going to bring everybody back. Yourself, Ambassador Young, Mary Pack Hector, Helen Butler, all the foot soldier people who we know are leaders in this community, to see just how well we did. Whatever happens is going to happen. But Michael, I thank you. I applaud you. I know your time is busy. I don't count it on robbery that you took it upon yourself to come join us, the OPNS family, the Facebook family, the YouTube family, yours truly, Bela Biz, MOD, WOD, we can go on and on, fraternities, sororities, whatever people are representing. But Michael, thank you. I think you said it well enough. We appreciate you. Hang tight. Family, don't go anywhere. I got a treat for you. We're going to have a closeout by my brother, Michael Julian Bond's brother, our MOD.